SMGs are without a doubt one of the fastest firing, highest quality, and ultimately most lucrative weapon types in Cyberpunk 2077. With a grand total of 12 guns when we factor in unique variants, the game has a nice range of choice for those who want to rise to the rank of most renowned person in Night City's criminal underworld. Using these things, you can take out entire enemy bases without actually aiming at anyone, or you can just straight up become a storm wizard, apparently. So as usual, I'm going to be testing out each of the game's submachine guns, weighing up aspects such as spread, power, and unique abilities before deciding once and for all which is best. If you've been enjoying the series thus far, then don't forget to leave a like on the video and sub to the channel, as it lets me know you want more videos like this. Thank you. As always, let's quickly outline the build I'm using when deciding my ranking for these SMGs. Perks-wise, I've of course spec'd the maximum into reflexes and bought up all the assault perks for their stat boosts and abilities. Then of course, a high-tech skill is required to craft the legendary variants of some of these guns, though engineering perks will also be helping us out here in boosting our ricochet, tech, and smart weapons. Personally, I've gone with cool and cold blood as my third attribute and perk tree, as it leans into the close quarters nature of SMGs. Then, with regards to cyberware, I've grabbed up the TNT Mark IV Sandevistan with low cooldown, mainly to show off the fire rate of these guns in slow motion. However, if I were you, I'd possibly spec some points into intelligence instead of cool, and then grab a cyberdeck with a legendary short circuit quick hack. This provides a passive ability wherein every crit hit deals extra electrical damage, and a whole lot of it too. It works great with SMGs simply because we're getting so many individual hits already. Main reason I'm not using it is because it's only a late game item and would unfairly make high fire rate guns appear better than they are for most people. Anyway, now that that's out the way, it's SMGing time. Yeah, no, never saying that again. Fine. The Shigure is a gun which can only be acquired from enemy drops, and as far as I'm concerned, serves to be one of the most unnecessarily difficult weapons to acquire in the entire game. It's a power SMG with a 30-round magazine and somewhat resembles, from what I can tell anyway, an MP5. That's probably the best thing about this gun, to be honest. Paired in a trio with the Nowaki assault rifle and Tamayura pistol, these three serve as an assortment of more classic enemy guns and can only be acquired randomly in the world. No word of a lie. I spent about 2 hours searching for a Shigure. I consulted forums, reloaded saves, and couldn't for the life of me get a single one to drop. Though if you haven't done the heist yet, they're pretty common in Konpeki Plaza, so that's an option. The one I'm using is a common variant which I had to console command in, and the highest one I've seen somebody else find goes up to epic. This doesn't really matter though, because all the Shigure essentially is a retextured Saratoga, a gun which can be acquired from weapon vendors and such. I do, however, really like how this gun looks and feels to shoot. It's definitely got the feel of a more classic video game SMG, with quite a bit of spread, which looks like this. The only reason I can really think to use this is if you're role-playing a V from our modern day who gets trapped in 2077 and refuses to use any weapon not resembling something from our time. Next up, since the Shigure was last, it's only fair that a retextured equivalent of essentially the same gun follows just after. The Saratoga is canonically the follow-on from the Shigure and was first made in the 2040s primarily for security agencies. As with most power weapons, we can usefully install a scope and muzzle, for better ricochet or silent espionage. Now this, despite being down here, this isn't at all a bad SMG, and to be fair, there isn't really one of those on this list. But it's hard to rank the Saratoga higher when it does nothing particularly special aside from just function as a good SMG. It's got noticeably less spread than its variants, but considering the problem of spread can be more or less negated by ricocheting bullets off the ground, that doesn't massively factor in here. However, you are much more likely to come across a regular Saratoga before Fenrir or the Problem Solver, making it a great early game SMG. If you decide you like the base variant more, then you can get a decent unique epic variant from the Cyberpsycho sighting discount dock in Rancho Coronado. Also, you can craft your own with a crafting spec which can be bought from all weapon vendors in Haywood. Our first smart SMG on the list, the basic Shingen holds a 30-round magazine and fires in triple bursts. It's extremely similar in fact to the Yukamara, and similarly reloads the magazine from the back. Yes, I did say magazine this time, and I'm absolutely determined to get the gun terminology right in this video, but if I don't, then please tell me. The database likens it to a bonsai tree, a tiny gun but intricately designed to pack a lot of substance nonetheless. Now, if you're decently spec'd into SMGs, turn off non-lethal targeting and make sure the gun is aiming for the head, it's completely completely possible to take out enemies with a single burst fire shot. This gun is powerful and very good at what it does. However, in general, I find burst fire mostly useful for tempering my shots and aiding my accuracy. But with smart guns, I don't need to be accurate, and find the time delay between bursts to be a tiny but unnecessary wait. Also, much like the Yukimura, there is an iconic variant of this gun, which is quite a bit better than this and completely free. To get a legendary regular Shingen though, head to the weapon vendor in downtown, or just, wait for one to drop, because you'll probably be much better off financially in the long term. When I saw that there was an SMG manufactured by Budget Arms, I of course immediately assumed I'd found an easy one for the bottom of the list. The Slaughtermatic pistol, after all, was a deliberate gimmick designed to sell the tone of Night City. Guillotine, on the other hand, is quite a different beast. Like, seriously, I feel almost guilty towards the Shingen and Saratoga for doing this, but I can't deny the fact that I really enjoyed this gun. It's a power SMG with a plastic body and a genuinely decent integrated digital scope. Despite the plasticky feel, the bullets feel surprisingly powerful and inflicts really nice damage, especially when ricocheting. Sure, there's a reasonable bit more kickback than other models, but vertical spread was surprisingly a lot lower. I picked this one up from Robert Wilson in the Second Amendment store of V's apartment building, after having to refresh it about 3 times. Now, surprisingly, despite allegedly being a budget gun, this still cost me 36,000 eddies, and don't get me wrong, it's worth every penny and even deals chemical damage as well. I'm just confused why the budget company which sell a pistol for 100 eddies also sell a genuinely decent SMG for 360 times that price. It makes me entirely reevaluate the company. Are they a gimmick or a viable contender in the arms race? Well, with perfectly viable guns like this, I'm starting to lean towards the latter. The better of the 2 base smart guns, in my opinion, is the G58 Dian, a more high-tech looking and faster firing weapon than the Shingen. Its superiority can be seen in the fact that it's used by members of Trauma Team, a company who notably spare no expense, because their prices are so expensive. This thing fires 30 rounds per mag and reloads exceptionally quickly. Most importantly though, the gun is fully automatic, and with a smart targeting system seeking out and eliminating enemies on our behalf, that's exactly what a smart gun ought to be, making it even more quick and even more powerful. The legendary crafting spec, funnily enough, can also be acquired from all the Hayward weapon vendors, or alternatively, you can source it for free from Miguel Rodriguez, a goon from the suspected crime activity over here in Vista del Rey. Again though, you might just want to hold off on acquiring the best version of this gun, because there's a variant coming up, which I think you might prefer. Now, the DS1 Pulsar isn't an uncommon sight around the gang camps of Night City, and is often regarded as a cheap and common gun, but I'm inclined to disagree there, and would argue that this is in fact one of the most powerful SMGs that are out there. Couple that with the larger than usual 40 round mag, and we can do some serious damage with this thing. Much like the Guillotine, shots may feel cheap in the way that they sound, but the result speaks for itself, with the quick firing bullets sparking chaos everywhere you shoot. For 56,000 eddies, you'll be able to buy one from the weapon vendor in Northside, and whilst I wouldn't necessarily recommend it due to the iconic counterpart Buzzsaw, there is actually one area where the regular Pulsar triumphs. You see, Buzzsaw doesn't do ground ricochet very well, but the Pulsar absolutely does. With the immense fire rate boasted by this gun, there obviously comes quite a lot of vertical spread. Again, and I'm going to keep saying this for several of these, this doesn't matter when we shoot at the ground, because there is a wider window for ricochet targeting than actually, shooting at the person. Senkoh LX is definitely one of the more interesting and creative guns in this game. Now, it looks a lot like a wallet or a purse, and that's because it's also designed to function as a fashion accessory. In fact, in order to buy this, we have to head to Jinguji clothing store in downtown and speak to Zane Jagger. Now, only really fancy people shop here, so we're gonna have to walk in with confidence, like we own the place, across the road here, and oh shit. Well, never mind, because apparently the guy doesn't care how we look. Word of advice for getting a nice discount at this store is to visit a few times and wait for the Cyberpunk event to trigger. Play through this lovely little side quest involving MaxTac, then wait a few more days for the store to refresh to normal. Zane will thank you for saving his life and give you a sweet discount. This accessory, of course, is most popular among corpos, people who need to defend themselves from ruffians, thugs, or heathens, but also want to look good whilst doing so. After all, even stuffing a miniature Shingen into those finely cut suits runs the risk of ruining the whole look, making this the only option. Honestly, prior to 1.6 when this gun was added, I do not know how corpos possibly coped. On a serious serious note though, I do wish there was more of a looks-based charisma system in this game, because carrying this weapon ought to be some step in completing a perfect corpo look for corpo bonuses. There could be a similar system for nomad tribes and gangs as well, and you'd have to change your outfit to blend in when interacting with each. I don't know, maybe that could be a good Orion feature. Anyway, in terms of the functionality of this gun, it definitely has a lot of versatility. The scope itself is fixed, but that's okay, because it works well enough and I quite like it. The weapon essentially has 3 firing modes. Firing without charging will quickly shoot a basic charge which can't penetrate walls. Charging it up will of course shoot more powerfully and go through walls, whilst holding charge for a second or two will release a very powerful continuous automatic spray until we stop or run out of ammo. That one does have a fair amount of vertical spread though, and will inevitably be much less accurate. On the whole, this is not only a decent all-round gun, but a creative one at that. Whoever knew that a tech SMG would be such a good idea? And you know what, as far as all the guns added in 1.6 go, this is definitely my favourite. The Problem Solver is one of 2 iconic Saratoga variants, and if you ask me, is pretty damn near unrecognisable compared to the base version. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but after scaling up to 85 rounds and almost tripling the fire rate, it's certainly quite different. Obviously, at a fire rate of almost 1,000 rounds per minute though, this one packs an unprecedented amount of both horizontal and vertical spread. I mean, look at this, I'm doing nothing here besides holding down both mouse clickers. It genuinely has a mind of its own. Also, as penance for the high rate of fire, individual bullets do significantly less damage. Though again, by firing at the ground and using ricochet, much of this issue is negated, with the gun being so much more accurate when used like this. With the large magazine as well, we're not constantly reloading, which also really helps this gun to work well. Ironically though, the Problem Solver does create more of a problem than other guns, and that has to do with ammo consumption. With lower damage rounds being fired, it obviously means we spend more bullets per enemy, and unless we make sure to be collecting up all ammo loot, this gun will bleed us dry much quicker than any other. But I suppose that it doesn't consume eddies at least, like the Plan B pistol. Else at 1,000 rounds per minute, we'd have spent the value of the Corpo Plaza apartment in under an hour. So to acquire this one, make sure to pick it up from one of the tougher looking wraiths during Riders on the Storm. I personally seem to have missed it that time around though, so headed back to the wraith camp to grab it again. If you really don't want to deal with the entire camp though, then grab a Sandevistan, silencer and optical camo, or maybe just a good sword or something, and just do this. They don't even know what happened. As I mentioned earlier, Buzzsaw is an iconic variant of the Pulsar, with the rare ability to penetrate walls and ricochet. Now, I do believe the only other 2 weapons that can do this are Johnny's Malorian and Rogue's Prejudice. Since Prejudice can't be kept by players though, this really is the only automatic gun that can do this. Funnily enough, I even found this one better at penetrating more walls than the Senkoh LX, which must be a bit embarrassing when you think that wall penetration is the major selling point of tech weapons. Unfortunately though, because the gun is automatically primed to penetrate surfaces if it can, ricochet is limited to glancing shots off of edges only. No floor ricochets with Buzzsaw, I'm afraid. Not that I could tell anyway. Still, the fact that this is kind of a tech and power weapon in one certainly makes it one of the more versatile SMGs. If you want to get this one, you'll have to complete the suspected crime activity Vice Control in Northside over here, acquiring the spec from an NPC named Yelena Sidrova. Named after the big wolf from Viking mythology, Fenrir already gets bonus points for just having a really cool name. Simple, badass, and to the point. It's also the other of the 2 iconic Saratoga variants, and can be acquired during the Sacrum Profanum side quest wherein you have to rescue a monk. Its bonuses include inflicting thermal damage and a higher chance to dismember. There's also less bullet spread, but more recoil, which I didn't actually notice, to be honest. Personally, I found precision with this variant of the gun to be easiest to achieve, with fire damage completing my job of murdering to death any enemies that I didn't fully shoot enough. Again, ricochet is your friend with this gun, increasing the number of hits and thus the chance to initiate burn. One of my absolute favourite guns is the Shingen Mark V prototype, and coming into this video I assumed it would be number 1, and can absolutely see why it still is for some of you. Even still, at my number 2, there's still a number of ways it triumphs above everything else. Acquiring this gun is pretty easy. We just have to come to a place you now may be a little overly familiar with, and for the first time in one of these videos I actually have to go into my testing area to acquire the gun I want to test with before I can actually test it. Thankfully, with a combination of the Chianti Mark IV and optical optical camo, that isn't a problem, and we can make our way to crate 667 completely undetected. An immediate improvement from the base Shingen I notice is the significantly wider targeting square, which I can confirm tracks and shoots up to 3 targets at once whilst aiming, as well as dealing thermal damage. Now, whilst I still stand by the philosophy that burst fire is an unnecessary feature of smart weapons, I do appreciate it a little bit more here. It gives a certain finesse or eloquence to this gun in particular. I feel fancy using it, I suppose, for lack of a better word. Also, I found pairing this one in particular with legendary short circuit, as I mentioned earlier, works really well for getting constant passive electrical damage on crit hits. That's why I featured it in my lazy build, which utilizes a combination of breach demons, smart guns, and passive effects. Overall, the Shingen Mark V prototype is very nice indeed. But the question I imagine you're all asking now is, Sam, how do we become a storm wizard in Cyberpunk 2077? And well, here we are, at the end. After this, I'll have reviewed every single gun as of 1.6 in Cyberpunk 2077. Sure, I've still got melee weapons and cars to do, as well as grenades, scopes, quests and perks, and you know, when Phantom Liberty comes out, it'll probably reset this whole thing and I have to do it again in some form, so stay tuned. There's a lot more coming, and a fair amount already there. Anyway, as I was saying, my number one SMG, the Yinglong, allows you to become a storm wizard. This is because the gun not only applies electrical damage to foes, but also EMP explosions. Big one. The name Yinglong literally translates to responsive dragon, and is the name of the rain deity in Chinese mythology. I guess rain is connected to storms, and that might be part of the naming inspiration for this gun. To acquire the crafting spec, you'll need to head to Wellsprings and acquire it from Denzel Cryer of the Animals clan, as part of the scanner hustle Living the Big Life. Denzel himself is garbed in some sort of ancient Chinese chainmail, further alluding to the conspiracy that this is an ancient magical artifact disguised as a gun. But whatever it truly is, it's without a doubt one of the most fun and enjoyable guns for me that I've ever used in the game. And like I just said, I've tried literally all of them now, but nothing quite like this. It says in the description that there's a rare chance for an EMP explosion. Now obviously this is an SMG and fires a lot of bullets, so I'd assume that would factor into the rarity and it would occur maybe a few times each fight. But I didn't expect this. Literally, most enemies were getting hit by at least one EMP, if not 2 or even 3. In fact, what was a rare occurrence was when I shot someone and it didn't trigger an EMP, which did become upsetting because the noise makes my ears quite happy, like a good song. Ultimately, using the Yinglong, I no longer felt like a gun-toting solo. Instead, I felt like a video game character in possibly the wrong video game. And that could be taken negatively, but when you've sunk hundreds of hours into a video game and are tired of feeling like an overpowered beast, feeling like something different is without a doubt a welcome change. And that's why, despite my continued love for the Shingen prototype, Yinglong has secured its place not only as my favourite SMG, but as one of my favourite guns. But what do you think? I mean, there's some really nice variation when it comes to the SMGs, so let me know your favourite submachine gun in Cyberpunk 2077 and why. Now that I've finally tested all the guns in this game, I think I'm ready to go and construct that Ricochet Bullseye build which I keep going on about, so keep an eye out for that soon. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you soon in another video.